So we've arrived at the point where we're going to put our long drop Octagon clock back on the wall, and of course this is not it. As you can see, this is a time-only clock with a calendar attachment, and as you can also see, it's a New Haven, but it is a long drop Octagon, and it'll be the subject of a future video. You see it has the wrong pendulum. Next to it we have an Ansonia Clock Company short drop Octagon clock, so that you can see what a short drop would look like. As you can see, the trunk there with the pendulum at is very short, and it just uses a regular old pendulum bob with a wire hook like what would be used on a lot of the old weight driven 8-day clocks. And of course it has an E&J Swigart Company of Cincinnati, Ohio replacement dial on it. And it's a nice dial. I think I've explained in previous videos my philosophy on dials. I would rather display a original dial that has some wear and soiling on it than a replacement dial that looks like crap. Well, this replacement dial actually looks pretty presentable. The time track there is about the right size. The numerals are well proportioned. It has the proportions of an original dial for a clock like this. Same goes for this dial. Of course, it's an original dial, but I've seen so many reproduction clocks like this where the hands and dial are badly proportioned to each other. As you can see, the minute and hour hand are proportioned to each other, and the minute hand ends at the outer edge of the time track, and then the calendar dial around the perimeter is correctly laid out with the calendar hand the correct length. I've seen a lot of these newer clocks where the minute track is outside the perimeter of the calendar markings, and the minute and hour hand are proportioned as though it was a non-calendar clock. All the originals I've seen are like this. So this is a very nice clock and a very nice dial. And of course I've got the Seth Thomas. I don't usually run this clock, so it's sitting here like this. There's the Seth Thomas Fleet clock. There's pictures of it on the website, so I'm not going to discuss it any further. And then here is the subject clock. And I have it hanging up on the wall. And I used one of the existing nail holes to put a screw through it into the wall to stabilize it, because there's nothing more aggravating about a wall clock than it shifting on you every time you open the doors up to wind it, and then you have to put it back in beat. And so what we're going to do now is take and hook the pendulum to the end of the rod and then see if the beat needs set. I did try running this clock a little bit before disassembling it in this location here, so I know the beat was adjusted previously. I don't know if it's going to need adjusting any further. So go ahead and get it started. And can you hear that? Sounds like it's lingering a little longer on the exit pallet than the entry pallet. So we might give it a little bit of adjustment here. And what we'll do is we'll bend this rod. You can use a tool to do this, you can use your fingers like I'm doing, but to bend it like this, to put your thumb here and a finger there and move it that way, would increase the dwell time on the exit pallet. On the other hand, to place the finger and thumb here and bend it this way decreases the dwell time. So we're going to do that just ever so slightly. There's a little bit of springiness to this brass, so you've got to go a little bit further than what you want to, and then let it spring back. but just doing a little bit, as though I'm not really attempting to move it much, because the beat I don't think is very far off. And we need to swing the pendulum adequately enough here. What do you think, viewers? Let's go back to the way it was. Maybe about halfway back. So this is sort of something you've got to develop a feel for. It's also important when doing this to try to set the overswing as little bit as possible. Look at the escapement and determine which tooth the escape wheel is resting on. It looks like it's resting on the exit pallet. Alright, we can really clearly see which way the beat needs to be adjusted. We need to have a little bit more dwell time on the entrance pallet. Okay, once again, figure out which pallet we're on. It looks like we are... Okay, no. Went too far. What we need to do now is watch it and listen for phasing that might indicate that the escape wheel is slightly out of round. Phasing would be where it wanders in and out of beat. I do think it's phasing just a little bit. What do you think? Please leave a comment below. The other thing we want to check is the crutch where it goes around the pendulum rod should be centered in the rod. It should not, the pendulum rod should not be touching the front or the back of the loop where the crutch is at. It looks to be pretty well centered. Go ahead and run the hands around a little bit to see how the strike sounds. We're hitting in the vertical position now. It's a very nice mellow tone. So I hear the beat changing a little bit, but I think all in all, on average, it sounds to be pretty good. And also I'm detecting some overswing. That is, you can see the pendulum continue to move after the tick is heard, which if you notice, when I started it, I moved it just far enough that a tooth would tick, and then released it. So it's picked up a little bit. So I really don't want to spend any time trying to fix that escape wheel. If it's going to run okay, and for a clock like this, I mean, you can get real anal about it and do a lot of things to the escape wheel, potentially even mess it up. But it seems to be running pretty well. I think the thing to do now is to set the time and see if we can regulate the clock. Overall, it's pretty good, especially for a clock that's mine. If this was a clock that I was repairing for somebody else, I might get a little bit more picky with it. But it seems to be working just fine. The beat seems to be okay overall. We could tweak it just a little bit more, but we need to listen to it during the full course of a rotation of the escape wheel and see if it changes a little bit. I think it does. Drops aren't quite even either, which adds to the sound that makes it sound like it's out of beat. And we could mess with that a little bit too. But given that it's running and it's picked up some overswing and the drops overall are pretty small, I think we'll go with this. So at this point, what we're going to do is set the clock to time. And run it. We'll run it for about a week, and then we'll put the dial back on it if everything's okay. So in that case, I've got a little ways to go to get back around to about 7:30. Looks like it's almost 7:35 now. Real nice center friction though. It's a lot better than it was. How's that? Okay, well thank you for watching. I'm going to let this continue to record until the clock gets through the warning cycle and strikes 3 o'clock, and then I'll set the time and we'll see what it does.